It's on days like this that you realise that if the great events of history had been televised, kind of would have been fascinating to see how they too would have been turned into utter drivel by the egos and the nonsense of the day. Because here we are, with a hopeful first stage of an actual possible peace process in sight, lots of hurdles still to overcome, serious business. We have slightly desperate celebrations already amongst the families of hostages, which makes me pretty fearful for them, because if I was them, I would save the champagne until they have those loved ones firmly back in their arms. So many things could still go wrong. Lots of focus needed to keep this process on track. But within minutes of the announcement of the breakthrough, we were wading through this kind of thing. And the thing that every world leader felt they most needed to do was to go on and on and on about how it was all to the credit of President Trump. And most absurdly, this utter fixation, drawing of course from his own obsessions, does this mean that Trump will gasp win the Nobel Peace Prize? All of which is out and out look at me garbage. Which other historical figure at a great moment in history do you recall spending all their time saying, "It's me, look, I did that, me, I should win a prize, me. Kind of makes it hard to give credit even where it's due, when the action seems performed with so little grace and so little public spirit. The fact that everyone's queuing up to give credit is because they're trying to curry favour, knowing that if they don't, their countries may get tariffed, their leader may be publicly humiliated, maybe even the US will seek to destabilise their regime, carry out extrajudicial killings in their waters. Narendra Modi's India got hit by an additional 25% tariff because he refused to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize for Trump's claimed and disputed role in bringing the border flare-up with Pakistan to a close. All of which seems predominantly to attest to why you would not give this person a peace prize. But if this plan turned into something bigger, a genuine enduring peace in the Middle East, the scale of that achievement would change the terms of reference for the discussion. It seems unlikely, but then, to be fair, so did the achievement of the agreement on this first step. So let's take a look at the whole thing rationally. First of all, what has been agreed today is not the 20-point plan that has been fronted by Trump. It's an agreement on just the first stage. Now, it's still quite a big agreement, because that first stage includes things that had not been countenanced before. Israeli forces retreating to a set line, all the hostages released, exchange for Palestinian prisoners, significant aid poured into Gaza to help the population there. There's no doubt that left to a normal style negotiation process, those items would probably not be being agreed at this point. Trump's shoot from the hip approach, broad brush, say one thing to one group, a different thing to the other group. I mean, it's a terrible style for many jobs, but supported by the leverage that the power of the United States brings to the table, it actually, in this case, provided something that could wrong-foot Netanyahu and Hamas, taking a yes but from each and turning it into a yes. And at some points, the momentum became harder and harder for either of them to push back against. Now you have hostage families celebrating, Israeli citizens celebrating, Palestinians across Gaza celebrating. They all think it's finally coming to an end. Pretty hard at this moment to turn around and say, you know what? Well, if Israel's not going to release this specific prisoner, then the deal's off. You know what? When we said we'd retreat behind a line, we really meant that maybe sometime next year we would start thinking about it. Either side scuppering the deal at this point would be subject to a pretty savage backlash. It's a circumstance that only the most powerful country in the world, being in the hands of a frankly erratic, unpredictable actor, could actually have achieved in the way and on the timeline that we have. The downside is that the features that push both sides into the initial breakthrough are not obviously suited to any of the subsequent phases of the 20-point plan. The interesting question at this point is this: what did America promise Hamas that hasn't been disclosed? Because the 20-point plan is, from their point of view, basically a surrender plan. It's everything that Netanyahu wanted. The reason why Hamas would never give back all the hostages before was that because once that had been done, they had zero leverage over Israel. So you can only imagine that they would agree to this deal if Trump, maybe along with some of the Arab states, gave them some pretty solid guarantees that they would not allow Israel just to flip back into war-fighting mode the moment the hostages were home. Which raises the question, do they really think they can trust Trump on that? Pretty sure I'd be hesitant to do such a thing if I were them. Except, ironically, if the deal turned bad like that, then I suppose it would truly scupper the Nobel Peace Prize dream. Which is the most ridiculous, dumb reason you can think of, but might actually turn out to be the most substantive constraint. But the problems ahead for this process will not be so easily solved. Hamas does not want to disarm, that much we know. Well, if Hamas doesn't disarm, will Israel go back to war? Netanyahu's not committing to the acceptance of an independent Palestinian state. Just the vaguest of nods in the direction of a non-specific roadmap, sort of vaguely in that region. And Hamas rejects the idea of Trump's so-called Board of Peace, composed of various technocrats and headed by Trump himself. No Palestinian would accept this, they said. Self-governance and statehood is the non-negotiable bit on both sides. And look, that is, after all, the fundamental disagreement that has kept this region in a state of conflict for so many decades. So if this peace process doesn't resolve that problem as creatively and counterintuitively as the first step, well, it doesn't end up as a peace process. It ends up as a end of the current fighting process. And the sort of people who win Nobel Peace Prizes would usually be able to tell the difference between that and actual peace. To have a hope of getting there, there will have to be a process with strong and ongoing attention to detail, patience, coupled with a sense of urgency, finely balanced judgment based on a solid understanding of the needs and motivations of each side. Not a description of a process that you would say plays to Donald Trump's strengths, if we can even describe them as such. And remember, the last such brokered deal saw Israel retreat from the agreement after the completion of just the first phase. And they did so with no consequences from Trump's America. So this time will be different. Why? In the meantime, the war has damaged everyone. Hamas committed personal and political suicide by engaging in their initial disgusting attack. Israel has destroyed itself in the eyes of the world by its conduct over time since then. In the first few months, people gave it a pass, but increasingly, as they pushed further and further beyond, less so. Even in America, always historically on Israel's side, overwhelmingly on its side in the aftermath of the attack, unsurprisingly, sympathised with by more than plus 48% of American voters. This has completely disappeared as we discuss this here today, with an unprecedented positive, just 1%, but positive nonetheless, support for Palestinians over Israel. For all the celebration and the hubris of the day, any realistic assessment is that this is mostly distracting from the serious business at hand. We should be focused on, and thankful if we succeed, getting that first stage turned into reality. Until hostages are finally home, there is really nothing yet to celebrate. Obviously, as far as MAGA is concerned, regardless of what comes next, their man is now pretty much higher than Mahatma Gandhi when it comes to the peacemaking business. Well, Gandhi also was never awarded a Peace Prize, of course, so they have that in common. But geopolitics has not been abolished. Right now, it means that there is no guarantee this is any more other than a false dawn. The real work still has to be done. Now, look, if Trump genuinely gets through the entire process, brings the region to actual, final peace, he will deserve huge credit, even if he only did it for the basest of reasons. I mean, plus he needs not to invade anywhere, or start jailing his political opponents, or that sort of thing. I know, picky. Don't blame me, blame those pesky Norwegians.